number 5 is The Blair Witch Project, the 1999 supernatural horror film that made me never want to go into the woods again. This found footage style film had audiences captivated when it premiered, largely because people thought it was genuinely real, including me. Its marketing campaign was morally questionable but brilliant, leading people to think that the movie's main characters were missing or even dead. They even went as far as having missing persons posters featuring the actors at screenings. This low-budget documentary-style horror movie follows film students Heather, Mike, and Josh as they head out into the woods in search of the fabled Blair Witch. The three friends find themselves at the center of strange occurrences. They seem to be lost and walking in circles, unable to find the road or their car. Horrific noises come from the woods, their stuff is being messed with, ritualistic items keep popping up, and paranormal happenings are running wild. 1 year later, they're still missing, and only this raw footage is found. The film preys on our most basic fears, not needing any fancy special effects or grotesque monsters. You feel like you're being haunted, but you're never sure by what exactly, until it's too late.
Coming up next at number 4 is Jeepers Creepers. Just the title of this film is enough to drum up some fear in me, primarily because all I can hear is that old creepy song of the same name. You know, the one that plays ominously throughout the movie whenever the creeper is on the hunt. And by creeper, I mean the demonic beast in the movie, not the director. Moving on. If you know, you know. Every 23rd spring for 23 days, the creeper comes out of hibernation with a hunger for human body parts. Siblings Trish and Derry find this out the hard way when they witness a rusty pickup truck dumping what looks like a body wrapped in blood-stained sheets down a drainage pipe. Of course, after being run off the road by said truck, they decide to go check it out and discover an underground chamber with walls and ceilings covered in corpses. While the storytelling leaves room to be desired, this 2001 horror flick features some pretty unfiltered gore. We see numerous dead bodies, a leg being chewed off, a decapitated head getting its tongue bitten off, and so much more. Jeepers Creepers also delivers such a terrifying villain. The Creeper is a massive, muscular, winged demon with razor-sharp teeth. From his head, he can expand a wide fringe of webbed appendages, sort of like an insect or a dinosaur from Jurassic Park. Interestingly enough, the film is loosely based on a true story, which always makes it worse, and that's fact. Of course, there's no flesh-eating winged demon, but it is inspired by a man who murdered his wife. He was spotted dumping her body by a pair of siblings, and subsequently tailed them for miles. What makes this film so scary is that you cannot escape the ancient demon, giving you a sense of impending doom throughout the entire film. You will definitely need to pray before and after watching this flick, and hope that the creeper doesn't find any of your body parts particularly appealing.
Coming in at number 3, we have Silence of the Lambs. So this film from 1991 doesn't have any ghosts or demons or anything paranormal at all actually, but what it does have is arguably worse. It has not one but two depraved serial killers. One, a charming but cannibalistic doctor who likes to eat human liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. The other, a social pariah who murders women and uses their skin to make a woman's suit, both of which could be walking among you and I, and we'd never even know it. The story follows FBI rookie Clarice Starling, who seeks help from convicted serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter in solving a string of murders. The bodies of women are turning up, skinned and mutilated. In a game of psychological cat and mouse, the brilliant yet disturbed Hannibal Lecter guides Clarice towards the murderer in a series of cryptic clues. What makes this particular movie so unnerving is the sense of humanity that is brought to the most inhumane content. Dr. Hannibal Lecter is a villain, an extremely wicked one at that, yet you find yourself strangely rooting for him the entire time. He's charming, witty, and ready to disembowel you and string you up like Jesus at any moment. Its scare factor has stood the test of time, still being considered one of the scariest films to date. Silence of the Lambs was also the first horror movie to ever win Best Picture at the Oscars, and the third movie to ever sweep the Academy Awards in all of the top 5 categories.
Moving on to number 2, we have Poltergeist. It's safe to say that this 1982 horror film scared so many of us growing up and gave us an irrational fear of TV static, clowns, and our own bedroom closets. Directed by Tobe Hooper and produced by Steven Spielberg, Poltergeist is one of the most iconic supernatural horror films of all time, and is certainly a film you'll need to pray before watching. The film follows Stephen and Diane Freeland and their 3 children. They're your typical all-American family in their seemingly perfect suburban home until it becomes an epicenter of paranormal activity. Their 5-year-old daughter Carol Ann begins conversing with something through the TV late at night. That is when the haunting begins. First, it's things moving on their own in the kitchen and around the house. Slowly, the haunting becomes more and more malicious and Carol Ann is sucked into a portal from inside her closet. The Freelands learn that they're up against a horde of poltergeists being controlled by an entity called the Beast, and that their home was built on top of a cemetery. Set at the peak of the climax is one of the iconic scenes that many people cannot seem to scrub from their minds, when the son is attacked by the evil clown and pulled under the bed. So maybe by today's standards, or for those accustomed to today's limitless digital effects, this film may not be the scariest. However, in the 80s, it was considered terrifying, especially since the film itself is said to be cursed. 2 cast members died after filming, both of them were highly unexpected and sudden. Dominique Dunne played the older sister and suffered a violent death shortly after the film's release. She was strangled to death by her boyfriend. Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann, passed away at the age of 12, just years after the film's release. The actress who played the mom said in an interview that actual human skeletons were used as props for filming. This has never been confirmed nor denied, but could certainly drum up some bad karma on set, I'd say. Alright guys, we've made it to number 1 and we have The Exorcist. Get ready to pray because in the number 1 spot is a film so disturbing that it had moviegoers throwing up, others fainting, and some even having heart attacks in theaters. Allegedly, that is. The Exorcist is the quintessential horror film and is considered the scariest movie of all time.
The 1973 supernatural horror film follows a little girl possessed by the demon Pazuzu who begins acting erratically after making ill-advised contact with the supernatural. The situation turns dire when Regan becomes increasingly more violent and disturbing, so her mother enlists priests to save her soul.
So many iconic scenes make The Exorcist an absolute nightmare. Regan's head spinning around, her projectile vomiting green goo, and when she walks like a spider down the stairs, just to name a few. Her mutilated face is also incredibly haunting, being covered in deep cuts and scars. Perhaps the most disturbing fact comes from the sound design. Much of Regan's grunting and groaning were made using pig squeals. When the demon is finally exorcised from her, the squeals we hear are pigs being led to their slaughter.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know this. I thought you did. I was gonna act surprised, but I thought you knew.
I'm surprised.
Ah, that's disgusting.
Yeah, yikes. The Exorcist was said to be cursed after a studio fire destroyed much of the set, and 9 people associated with the film's making passed away by the end of production. Priests were regularly called in to bless the cast, crew, and set.
To make matters worse, the film is based on a true story. The book in which the film was based on was inspired by the real-life exorcism of a young boy.
In at number 5 we have The Descent, 2005. First up we have The Descent, a British film from 2005 about a caving exhibition. We follow a group of 7 women exploring a cave that's never been explored before. The only way out of the cave is through it, so they travel deeper and deeper until they're trapped deep underground. We watch as one by one they meet a horrible fate, some accidental climbing mistakes, others descending into madness. They soon find out they are not alone in the cave and are being pursued by terrifying hordes of crawlers, what we might today call Wendigo. They are a race of cave-dwelling humanoids who have adapted to near-constant darkness and lost any previous trace of humanity they may have had, becoming monsters in the process. The girls start to turn on each other while they struggle to survive in the darkness. They created 2 different endings for this film after deciding that the British ending was too dark for the US audience. In the US ending, our main character wakes up in the cave and crawls to the surface back to her car. When she is driving away, she pulls over and vomits, and when she leans back in the car, she is startled by the ghost of Juno sitting in the passenger seat. However, in the British version they reveal that this was all a trick of their mind, and she wakes up back in the cave, having never escaped at all. The film ends with the screams of the crawlers getting louder as they surround her. This one is enough to make anyone scared of the dark. Coming in at number 4 we have Ringu, 1998, aka The Ring. We have all heard about the adaptation of The Ring, but have you seen the original, more horrifying one, Ringu? The story follows a reporter and her ex-husband as they investigate the sudden death of her niece, who died of a sudden heart failure with an unnaturally horrified expression on her face. She then finds out that her niece recently visited a cabin with her friends. Each of them had died the exact same way on the exact same night. She visits the cabin to find out what could have caused them all to die so suddenly when she finds the unlabeled tape. After watching the tape, she understands that they had all been cursed as she was now. Things become more tense when Reiku's young son watches the tape, starting the 1-week countdown before he too dies. She has to break the curse or she and everyone she cares about will die in less than a week. Their discovery takes them to a volcanic island where they can discover that the video has a connection to a psychic who died 30 years ago and her child. In the end, they discover that the only way to break the curse is to copy it and show it to someone else, passing it on to them, dooming them instead of you. It's a good thing no one has a VHS player anymore. In at number 3 we have A Nightmare on Elm Street 1984. This one is sure to keep you up at night. A Nightmare on Elm Street follows a group of teenagers battling a killer who attacks in their dreams. We follow Nancy and her friends trying to figure out why they're being hunted and how to stop it. This was our first introduction to the infamous Freddy Krueger, a killer who is badly burned all over his body. He uses a gloved hand with razors to kill his victims. Nowadays we all know who Freddy Krueger is, but in 1984 a killer who hunts you in your dreams was truly terrifying. Nancy has to struggle to stay awake throughout the filmmaking, depending on caffeine to keep her awake for days on end. They slowly discover that they are being hunted due to their parents being involved with Freddy's death. Nancy's mum revealed Krueger was an insane child murderer who had been released on a technicality and then burned alive by parents living on their street seeking vigilante justice. They attempt to bring Krueger out of the dream so they can kill him in the physical world. Could you stay awake for 7 days to avoid Freddy? I couldn't. In at number 2 we have Psycho 1960. This was the original slasher film. When Psycho premiered in 1960, the audiences were screaming in horror. They could not believe their eyes. It took the world by storm and instantly became a classic for horror lovers. Alfred Hitchcock wanted to shock audiences and do something no one else had ever done before. The audience were horrified that Marion Crane, the main character, had been so brutally murdered. Never before had a main character died in a film, and here she was stabbed repeatedly within the first 30 minutes. Hitchcock even received an angry letter from one man claiming his daughter is now refusing to shower thanks to this film. The film continues when Marion's sister starts to wonder where she is. Marion had stolen money from her previous job and was hoping to make a new life when she stumbled into the Bates Motel. Lila hires a private detective to look into the disappearance, but once he goes to the Bates Motel, he too never returns. When Lila and her partner Sam go to visit the house, they see Norman Bates in the window. They go to the police to report all of the mysterious disappearances, where they are told that Norman's mother, has been dead for 10 years. Later it is revealed that Norman Bates had multiple personalities and had been acting as himself and his mother since her death, killing unsuspecting women who visit the motel. It might not seem like much now, but this film was as terrifying and horrific as films came in the 60s and paved the way for the horror genre. Freaked me the out. I saw it at 4. Accidentally. And finally in at number 1, The Conjuring 2013. We're all very familiar with the Conjuring franchise, but did you know that the set of each film is thought to be haunted after many spooky happenings on set? The Conjuring series is based on the real experiences of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, so it makes sense that the spirits that the films are about might not be too happy about it. The first film released in 2013 and followed the story of a family who've just moved into a farmhouse when they start to suspect something is not right. They call in Ed and Lorraine to help save them from spirits within the home. The hauntings do not stop when the camera stopped rolling. Some of the cast members began to notice unexplained bruises over their bodies. Similar to this, the lead actress Vera Farmiga woke up one morning and noticed 3 claw-like scratches on her thigh. She said they didn't hurt, but it looked as though someone with long nails had dragged them over her skin. Vera seems to have got the worst of the hauntings and also woke up between 3 to 4 AM when she began filming. She was a little spooked, as the witching hour is something that has been talked about during the film. Was the set haunted by the original ghosts? I guess we'll never know, but probably.
Number 5. Dead Silence. Okay, so before Aquaman and The Conjuring was released in theaters, director James Wan teamed up with horror writer Leigh Whannell to make Dead Silence. This film was released in 2007 and only made $16 million in the box office despite its $20 million budget. Now, I started this list off with Dead Silence because this movie should have done a lot better. I remember sneaking into the theater to watch this, that's how old I am, and I'm sure glad that I did. Dead Silence packs all the punches you need for a solid horror flick. We got creepy dolls, an angry old lady, Donnie Wahlberg is there as a detective, so you know it's gonna be great. It's good fun all around. So in Dead Silence, we follow the life of a widow named Jamie Ashen, who returns to his hometown, Ravens Fair, for the funeral of his late wife. His wife had received a creepy package containing a ventriloquist doll named Billy. Already a creepy name. and then was found murdered only minutes after. Talk about a crazy Friday. Ooh. Now obviously, Jamie is a prime suspect in the murder, so he decides to unravel this mystery while he's in Raven's Fair for the funeral. Now already this sounds like a classic whodunit mystery murder, you know? We got dolls, detectives, I'm already sold on this whole thing. But this is when things start to get a little crazy. So back in the 1940s, local ventriloquist Mary Shaw was the talk of Raven's Fair. I mean, that was until a young boy heckled her during her show and exposed her entire act. The townsfolk didn't react too well because, they hunted her down and cut out her tongue and left her for dead. So that went from 0 to 100 quite quick. That's a bit much, guys. Leave a bad Yelp review, maybe, something, I don't know. Egg her house. There's other steps before this, maybe, I don't know. And as if that wasn't alarming enough, the townsfolk buried her with her children. And by children, I mean her ventriloquist dolls, of course. Now, as time passes, Mary begins to seek revenge on all of those who did her dirty, with the help of her insane doll posse. So why should you watch this movie? Well, despite a handful of cheesy scenes, James Wan delivers the goods in this hidden gem. The horror sequences are done really well and even has a twist ending that's actually quite fun. Mary Shaw is a terrifying villain, both to look at and to see what she does. One of the rules is that if you see her and don't scream, she won't kill you, which is a lot harder than you can imagine once you see what this chick's capable of. I hated how much this movie scared me as a kid. I mean, even rewatching it now as an adult, it's horribly underrated. This movie came from the same guys who brought you the Conjuring, Saw, and Insidious movies. So if you liked any of those, you can't miss Dead Silence. Number 4, Buried. Starring everybody's favorite Canadian merc with a mouth, Ryan Reynolds stars as the lead of the 2010 box film Buried. Waking up all alone in a pitch black wooden coffin, American truck driver Paul Conroy has to figure out where he is, why he's there, and most importantly, how to get out alive. Ryan Reynolds is the only visible actor in the entire movie, and it was filmed in only 16 days in Barcelona, from director Rodrigo Cortés. Ryan Reynolds absolutely carries this film from start to finish, not only because he has to, but because Ryan Reynolds himself suffers from claustrophobia in real life, and you can see it in every scene in this movie. The movie starts up with Reynolds waking up in a coffin with only a lighter and a BlackBerry. Not even an iPhone either, what a tragedy. He then learns that he's being held for ransom for $5 million, and then has to rely on bad signal, low phone battery, and lack of information to find a way out alive. Now, I won't give away any of the plot as I truly do believe this is one of the best hidden gems out there. The film is coated with these beautiful one-shots that shows our protagonist struggling to remain calm. And as you watch Paul run out of oxygen in the movie, you yourself start to feel the same thing. And that's what makes Buried so great. Some movies have a great premise, but the decisions of the main character don't quite align with how you would react if you were in the same spot. So it makes it not relatable and you find yourself less connected to the horror sequences. Buried is the perfect movie because Ryan Reynolds reacts like we would. He panics, he gets mad, and he immediately tries to break his way out, and you can actually see him struggle. And for a movie with just one main character, Buried leaves you breathless for all the right reasons. Number 3, As Above, So Below. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Well, you can say that again, Satan. Directed by John Eric Dowdle in 2014, As Above, So Below follows a group of explorers who sneak into the depths of the Paris catacombs to find the Philosopher's Stone. Okay, this already sounds like a rejected Harry Potter plot, but I promise it's much more sinister than that. The main character, archaeologist Scarlett Marlowe, has spent most of her life trying to figure out where to find Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, as it has the powers to grant immortality and even turn any metal into gold. Sounds like a pretty cool rock. Worth the troubles, I would say. As Above, So Below is filmed to look like a documentary, so the sudden shifts in camera work are already enough to get spooked. The film's loosely based on the 9 stages of hell, so it's quite fast-paced and uses themes such as lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery. That's a lot of plot points for a film coming in at just an hour and 30 minutes, yet this movie nails it. Each character has a hidden past that is yet to be discovered in order to move on, so you're not quite sure what's going to happen next or which hellish theme you'll be getting along the way. Which is a breath of fresh air compared to your usual, slasher horror flick with some teenagers, which we'll get into a little bit later. As Above, So Below did well in the box office, yet it's still one of the most underrated movies discussed today. Have you seen it? Have you heard of it? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. Number 2, Joyride. I'm sure a lot of us grew up prank calling people at one point. It was always such a rush, you click star 67, you dial the number, you're never sure who's gonna answer or what they're gonna say. Ultimate prank. But what if you prank called somebody and they happen to be a psychotic truck driving murderer? Starring Paul Walker and Steve Zahn, the 2001 thriller Joyride left us never wanting to prank call anybody ever again. The film begins like a classic goofy brother comedy. Guy's on his way to drive across the country to see his love interest. Lewis Thomas, played by Paul Walker, is accompanied by his fun, wacky brother, Fuller, played by Steve Zahn. The film gets us to like this duo right off the bat. I mean, Paul Walker's charm mixed with Steve Zahn's careless humor gets audiences to want these brothers to succeed. Their plans are quickly halted when Fuller decides it's a great idea to use a truck radio and prank call a passing truck. The brothers think that all is said and done until the truck driver, known as Rusty Nail, begins to stalk and terrorize the boys. What a great nickname, by the way. Rusty Nail, really tetanus, it's got the whole thing. This movie hits hard with audiences because you don't see what Rusty Nail looks like. In a world filled with truck drivers, you can imagine the anxiety of driving at night, knowing any of them around you could be your killer. With powerful performances from the cast, this movie feels fast-paced and very, very stressful. 2 sequels came out after, but none of them compare to the original, obviously. Number 1, The Cabin in the Woods. Directed by Drew Goddard and written by Joss Whedon, The Cabin in the Woods is a new take on a classic tale. We start with the usual. We got a group of teenagers heading to a secluded cabin in the woods to find a plethora of haunted relics in the cellar. Usual stuff. I mean, after reading a passage from one of these books, they begin getting hunted down by killer zombies. This already sounds like it's been done before, and that's exactly what they wanted you to think. So while the gang acts like a stereotypical group of teens in a slasher flick, scientists are working behind the scenes at the same time to ensure that everything in the cabin is going exactly as planned. The haunted relics are there purposely, so that they are discovered. So in the movie, it is said that the Lovecraftian gods, known as the Ancient Ones, actually exist in real life. So, in order to keep them calm and collect and cool, and hopefully not destroy the entire planet, a sacrifice must be made. So that's where our dumb high schoolers come in. With many twists along the way, the film does a great job of acknowledging how overdone these basic horror tropes can be. Some scientists even place bets on which relic they're gonna find first or play around with first. The movie's filled with many humorous scenes. It's hard to not love these idiots, you know? But at the same time, The Cabin in the Woods almost makes you root for the bad guys. I mean, after all, if these kids don't die, the rest of the world does. With a great double twist ending, The Cabin in the Woods did quite well with critics, and many have been demanding a sequel since its arrival in 2011. If you were going to release any monster in the world, who would it be and why? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 5. 13 Ghosts. Released in 2001, starring Shaggy and Monk, aka Matthew Lillard and Tony Shalhoub, 13 Ghosts was the OG Cabin in the Woods. The movie opens with this rich collector and his assistant, Matthew Lillard, as they try and capture a ghost called the Juggernaut. And as you probably guessed based off of the name, they got their ass kicked, and the rich collector meets his fate. Horribly, that is. So after his death, it's revealed that he intended on leaving everything to his nephew and his family. Starting with a large mansion made mostly of glass because, hey, those sound comfortable. Matthew Lillard's character disguises himself as a power company employee, and then while he's in the house, he realizes that it's actually a secret nightmare. The house is basically a prison for ghosts. Held captive by spells written on the walls, the ghosts aren't too fond of their new home. So one by one they start getting out, and the group must fight their way out of this monstrous prison. I was only 6 when this movie came out, and it of course scared me back then. Revisiting the movie now as an adult, it's really enjoyable to watch still. The opening scene shows how brutal these supernatural forces can be, so once you find out about the other 12, you're like, oh man, now I'm ready to go. The makeup's done super well for all these monsters too, because they had to. They didn't have CGI back then, or they did, but it didn't look nearly as good as it does now. The film doesn't really age because it relied mostly on the human performances playing all these ghosts, and they're amazing. It's kind of like when you go to an amusement park during Halloween and you see all those really good performers. It's just like that, but with lots of blood. And of course, Matthew Lillard. Sold. Number 4, The Descent. Written and directed by Neil Marshall, The Descent follows a young woman named Sarah after her husband and daughter's untimely tragic death. So about a year after the loss of her loved ones, Sarah and her 5 friends decide, let's shake things up a bit and explore some caves. You know, to get their mind off things. So the group had always been the type to explore, as the film opens with them on a whitewater rafting expedition. The trip starts to go off the rails when rocks collapse and they trap the explorers inside. Oops! So desperate for a way out, they start looking frantically. And they encounter this ancient mural that appears to show like another exit. Hell yeah, let's do it. Which way do we go? They see this bright light thinking that they found the exit, thinking that it's daylight. Turns out it's actually a bright rock. And then Holly rushes over to it and then bam, it's just a trap. She falls down into this big pit. Her leg straight up snaps, right through the skin. It's disgusting. So now we have like a 127 hours type situation. Things aren't looking great. Broken leg plus stuck in a cave equals bad, not good. Then come the monsters. That's right, so after the others rappelled down to help Holly, they used night vision to see their surroundings, which was a horrifying scene, always is when it comes to night vision. They ended up finding animal bones. And then also one of the creepy cave crawlers. These things are horrible right from the start. They can crawl around super fast, they can stick to walls, they look like scary humans, and they use their teeth to attack. I love this movie. As I was watching, I felt like I couldn't breathe the entire time. I mean, a movie about explorers stuck in a cave? That's already good enough for me. I don't need any cave monsters to add to the mix. I also appreciated how they used real-life relatable tragedies. After the death of somebody that's close to you, that's such a vulnerable time. And for this film to take that time and then add monsters and a love triangle, that's right, they're not holding back at all. This movie came out in 2005 and didn't get the hype that it should have. Many times during it, I asked myself, would I have been able to film this movie? Like if I was asked to do this film, like they made a massive set with tight corners and low ceilings, they made it look scary and they made it look tight. Because obviously it'd be too dangerous to film in an actual cave. I don't know, I think my claustrophobia would be too insane. That plus a camera crew around me and this monster looking dude who's like 17 trying to bite my toes. I don't know, would you do it? Let us know in the comments, I'm curious. Number 3, The Strangers. Released in 2008, starring Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman, and directed by Brian Bertino, The Strangers is the sole reason I'm afraid to go to my kitchen alone at night. To this day. To this day! I saw this when I was 13. I was 13 years old, guys. This movie is also inspired by true events, which is also a great sell when you're watching it. That's the worst, eh? You're watching a movie and the very last minute it says, based on a true story. And you're like, so we find a couple, James and Kristen, while they're staying at a vacation house after a wedding. Sounds like the perfect getaway, right? So James decides, you know what, love is in the air, I'm feeling good. He proposes to Kristen. She declines the offer. Yikes. James' best friend Mike's like, alright man, I'll come pick you up the next morning, just stay cool, super embarrassing, sorry about that. So normally that night would be pretty quiet, but instead it ended up being terrifying. 4 a.m. rolls around and the couples are woken up to a loud knock on the front door. Always a good sign. Dim lighting makes it hard to see the face of the young woman, but she asked if Tamara was home. James is like, no, she's not. Also, it's 4 a.m. Bye. James' next move was to go to the store to buy cigarettes for Kristen, as she's probably shaken up. Good timing, James. Just get out of the house right after you hear that. A+. So while James is gone, Kristen is occupied trying to get smoke out of the house because they'd previously lit a fire but forgot to open the chimney flue. Rookie mistake. She wanted smokes, not smoke. Listen up, dude. God. Then things start to get a little bit wild. So while she's standing in the kitchen just hanging out, smoking, chilling, you can see somebody in a mask just standing in the background. She doesn't notice it, but we do. And it's the best. Check it out. Yeah, it's not pleasant. This movie came out long before Hush, so the whole intruder standing still with a mask thing hadn't really been done yet. She ends up realizing her phone's missing, and then she realizes she's in fact not alone. So like I said, this movie made me afraid to be home alone, truly. It's shot so well and it uses anticipation to drive the viewers nuts. You gotta give props to Brian Bertino. He actually told Liv Tyler during filming that she would hear a loud noise from a specific spot, okay? Boom, action. But then when she ended up doing the scene, the noise actually came from a different area, causing Liv Tyler to actually jump in fear. What a nice touch. Little things like that are noticeable in movies. The fact that every scene that you watch too has the camera moving slightly, it adds to it. It feels like you're standing there in the room. If you haven't seen The Strangers, make sure you don't watch it while you're home alone. Or you know what? If you think you're hardcore, do it. I dare you. Number 2, Dark Skies. Okay, with all this talk about Venus potentially showing signs of life, it sparks quite the conversation. Are aliens real? Are we the aliens this whole time? What's going on? So it was only fair to add some extraterrestrial goodness to this list. Dark Skies, directed by Scott Stewart, is the classic tale of a family being stalked by aliens. Good times. And it's probably the scariest alien movie I've seen. Hear me out. So we have the Barrett family, Lacey and Daniel, and their 2 young sons, Jesse and Sammy. The family is the usual suburban type. The older son actually gets along with the younger brother, which I liked. Usually movies make it so the siblings don't like each other, and then when something spooky happens, nobody believes them or gives a shit. This movie shows the 2 as buddies. They use walkie-talkies to say goodnight. Real cute stuff. Lacey is a real estate agent and Daniel is currently unemployed, which right off the bat shows that these people have real life problems already. Makes the family more relatable in a way. It sucks the viewers in. The movie doesn't wait long either to start cooking. Strange things begin to happen to the family. Birds start flying into windows, kids are acting strange, and most notably, Lacey goes down to the kitchen one night and sees everything stacked and balanced together in a really weird way. Like this. So naturally, the youngest one is being questioned. Plus him acting weird at parties and stuff, it makes things not look so chill. Eventually, they ask for help from an alien specialist. Now, the movie at this point could have gone either way, but J.K. Simmons played the alien specialist, so now it's a great film. He kills it. His character is very compelling, very soft-spoken. He refers to the aliens as the Greys, which is just kind of neat in general. I don't know, it sounds weird when he says it. The Greys. I don't know, it's good. I can't do the rasp. So now we got ourselves a good time. For being an alien movie that doesn't take place in space, Dark Skies did very well. It wasn't reviewed too well by critics, but horror fans all over have constantly backed this movie up. What did you guys think? Was it cringe or was it creepy? Let us know in the comments. And finally, number 1, Color Out of Space. Okay, I saved this one for last because this movie is a goddamn nightmare, and it's a roller coaster. Released in 2019, directed by Richard Stanley, Color Out of Space stars Nicolas Cage, Joely Richardson, and Julian Hilliard, who we recognize as the young kid Luke from Haunting of Hill House, with the glasses, so cute. So the family is sleeping, hanging out, doing their own thing, when all of a sudden a meteorite crashes and lands near their house. It's pink or more magenta colored. Now, normally you'd think, oh, maybe it's an alien and this will be a movie about aliens. Or maybe a transformer.
I think we just found a transformer.
Based on the H.P. Lovecraft story also titled Color Out of Space. So what's the deal? Without giving too much away, the meteor starts making people act weird, to say the least, and it might be the most ambitious horror movie I've seen in a very long time. So I watched it for the first time about a week ago, and I gotta tell ya, made me question my sanity as soon as the credits started rolling. I had no idea what I was watching at times, like literally none of it, but I enjoyed every part of this movie. I didn't watch the trailer or anything beforehand, and I strongly recommend you do the same. So at the beginning, it felt like I was watching something like Halloween Town, right? It starts off fun, a little cheesy, and like the actors are kind of weird, doing their own thing, like certain character choices where you're like, I don't understand why this is important. And then by the time the end of the film rolled around, my friends and I were just like, what did we just watch? We were in shock. I had no idea where the plot was going once the meteor crashed, but in a good way. These subtle little character changes that happen after that, on and off screen, are so key. The best part of the movie, that in my opinion makes it worth watching, is Nicolas Cage. And I'm not even saying that in a funny way. I know he gets mocked a lot for his performances, but he plays this really cool dad who's trying to keep his family from losing their minds while he's slowly losing his mind. It is a slow burn in the entire movie, and it's such a treat to watch. This Lovecraftian cosmic horror was the perfect film to use Nicolas Cage's wacky anecdotes. The director even said to him, hey, can you tap into the same style of performance you had from Vampire's Kiss? And if you've seen that, you know you're in for a treat. This movie is also really funny at times, unintentionally. You gotta check it out.